Alright, so the next lesson here we want to discuss is is using radial patterns. Um, you'll notice here that when one thing you have to be careful of, and this is a bit of a detour, but it's worth discussing. If you're going to be using plugins like this, particularly with nDo, you have a few floating windows here that rely on your Photoshop application, but quite well, you'll notice in cases like now when I want to use the hotkey in Photoshop to pan, you hold the Shift key down, or the spacebar key, and you left click and drag, and you'll pan your document without having to zoom out. But the Shift key in this window will open the options. So say I'm navigating this here, I'm changing the lighting, I like what I want, and I go over here to Photoshop and I hold Shift and left click, nothing happens. It's because this window was previously active, okay? So you may get stuck between windows. If you do, just select somewhere in the Photoshop window itself, and then you can activate tools and hotkeys. Same thing goes here if you're floating over this window. This window in particular does a great job of deactivating when you leave it. Very quickly, automatically, you'll see. Cursor changes here and then back to the magic wand tool here. But with 3Do it's different. It doesn't change automatically. You have to select the document. So you may run into that problem. Okay, so let's do some cool designs here on the side, something with a radial pattern. I'm going to activate my UV island overlay here and zoom out a little bit. That was a lot of it. There we go. Okay. Change my lighting here so I can see what we're doing, and I want to put just a circle here that we can do a radial pattern that would look interesting, right? But still mechanical and support the overall design of the level. And I'm familiar with what I've done in the other parts of the level, so I know this theme will work. And you'll see that later when we plug the textures into Unreal Engine 4. Okay, so based on the UV island overlay, I know here that this is this wide corner bevel that I have right here in the image. This is the flat face here that I was painting on. So this is the surface that I want to work with to put a design right here. So with I want to cut the surface in first, I believe. So I'm going to zip my up layer. There we go. Select my down layer. Unzip it, because I think I can utilize the same kind of normal detail with this design, even though it's a separate part of the document. And like I said before, consolidating your similar looking normals into the same parent folders can help with performance and to keep things organized. Okay, so I'm going to create a new layer. So I'm not going to hold Shift, or I'm not going to hold minus to add, because I'm not concerned with this information interacting with what I'm doing over here. So I'm okay with creating a new layer. I'll just left click and drag, constrain proportions in the drag location. Just hold Alt and Shift to create a circle I like. This looks okay. Let me let that go. Hide my UV overlay, refresh, and check my distance. I may have to move that over a little bit. It's a little bit too far to the left or the back of the object. So select my my shape or my path select tool with the letter A. Nudge this over a little bit. Leave that there. Hit refresh, and we'll see how that sits. Give it a moment to refresh. That's not too bad. Maybe do one more time. Give it a moment. There we go. Okay, that looks good. So now how do we capitalize? Like we did before, we already made this shape. Now how can we use this form to help us create other forms that support it, right? That complement it. And there's a fairly easy way. Let me show you. In Photoshop, whether it's pixel information or a smart object here, you can use guides that will snap to your current selection. And by guides, as long as you have snap turned on in your view options and snap to guides, I keep it all selected. As long as you have those on, let me fix that. You can pull out guides that will snap and help you create more information, and it's best if I just show you. If you hit Control R, that'll show your rulers in Photoshop, and I think it's a good idea to keep these hidden at all times, because with the rulers showing, for me, the performance of Photoshop will plummet when I'm panning around and zooming, particularly with a lot of pixel information with something like nDo. So I hide them when I need them. Oh, sorry, I show them when I need them, and I hide them when I don't. If I left click and drag out from the ruler, try that again, there we go, you see a guide will pop up, and it may be difficult to see on the screencast because it's a gray color, but when I release, you'll see this green line show up, and because I had snap engaged and this object selected before I pulled the guide, when I pull the guide out, it'll automatically snap to the edge or the center of my selection. So I do the same from the top, and I can snap it right here to the edge if I want by just releasing, or I can snap it to the center. And in my case, I'm concerned about the center, and I'll explain why in a moment, because I want to create a radial design. So if I want to move this guide, I hit the V key, which I'm not sure if it's the move tool or the select tool in Photoshop, the proper name, I don't know. But hit the V key on your keyboard, and you'll see the cursor changes when you hover over the guide. Left click and drag, and it'll still snap to your current selection, like that. Okay, great. Now we have two guides intersecting at the center of our object, and we will use this center to create a radial pattern around the object. Okay, I'm going to hit Control R to hide those to the rulers, and at any point later on, if you want to hide these guides and they're getting in the way, Control H will toggle showing your guides. Okay. Now, radial patterns. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you. I can choose any shape I want, and that shape will be duplicated around this circle perfectly. Okay, so in my case, it's a guessing game. Maybe you see something in your mind's eye that you want to create. Let me drop the radius of this curved rectangle to 3, because this rectangle is going to be fairly small in size. So I'm going to click, and when you have snap turned on, you left click and drag from your guides. Your creation point is going to snap to the guide. If you want the creation point to be the center of your object, hold Alt. Okay, and if you want to move the object up and down, you can also hold Shift key. And if you, the spacebar key. If you hold Shift, it'll constrain the object to a square. I don't think I want to use a square, but we can give it a try, I suppose. Hold Shift key to move it up. Now we'll use something a little bit longer. There we go. Let's see what this looks like. Good. Now nothing appeared because I didn't hold Alt when I first created the object. And what I would like to do, move here, I'm going to combine this shape with the one beneath it, or I can create it again. I've already showed you how to combine. Let me just delete it. I'll create it one more time. Holding the Alt key, I'm going to subtract from this shape beneath it here. See? The one that we created before. Let's try this again. Holding the Alt key, dragging the form, move it up a little bit. There we go. I've subtracted. I don't think I like that look very much because the bevel here is affecting what I've subtracted here, and so when we refresh that, I'm not too pumped about it. But what I may do is just move this object up to my my other layer that's going up, and because this layer is above this other one, I'll probably get a much subtler look with something I'm more pleased about. Okay, so I'm going to cut that shape out. Move back to my up layer, unzip it, and with this selected, let me see if I can paste it. Oh, it won't let me. That's okay. Oh, or did it? It did let me paste, though I'm a little bit... Yeah, I'll just delete that. I'm not exactly sure where that ended up. Let's draw it one more time. It would have been fine if this layer here had been a smart object. I could have pasted in there without a problem, but because it's a rasterized layer, I'll have to recreate it. Not a big deal. Let's do that quick. Holding Alt. And I'm essentially going to create a new layer there. Let's see how this looks. Maybe I'll make the shape a little wider. Control T. Give us a little bit of a bevel there. A little bit skinnier. There we go. Let's refresh this. Let's see how it looks in our viewport here. Okay, that looks pretty simple right now, but where it becomes more interesting is when you have it repeated. Okay, so to do that and to use these guides, simply you select the object here, the whole object, Control Alt T like we said before, which will make a duplicate copy that you can transform. And holding the Alt key, you select on the very center of this object. Now, I don't know if you can see it in the screencast, but there's a little crosshair here, which is the orientation that when you manipulate this object, it'll use this orientation to rotate around, for example. It's just like in a 3D modeling application. If you change your origin or your point of manipulation, you can change how it behaves. So right now, I can rotate from the center of the object. I'm going to delete that. If I Alt left click and using the Shift key to constrain this object up and down, I can move this down to the intersection of these 2 points. And it doesn't have to be too perfect. Within a couple pixels is fine. Now, without pressing anything else, I can hover my mouse outside of this object, and you can see that 2 arrows appear, which basically are saying that I can begin rotating this object. And because I moved the pivot point, I will also, it'll rotate around wherever I move the point to, and in this case, it's the center of the circle. If I hold the Shift key, I will snap the object, and the benefit of snapping the object here is it'll snap to, it'll perfectly snap when I make duplicates around the object to end here. Okay? Let me show you what I mean. Let me commit that there. Press Enter to confirm, and then Control Alt Shift T, tap, and I'll make a radial copy around the object, and I'll end there. Let me hit refresh, and there we have it. Okay, that looks a little bit more interesting, I think. Now, one thing I haven't done yet, which is a little bit naughty, I haven't saved my document. So let me hit the Save button. But if you remember from the beginning, when nDo created the document for us, it chose an arbitrary location, and I'll show you why, or where at least. Control Shift S will bring up your Save As dialog box, and essentially it chooses a location in your app data local temp folder, which I think is useless. So I'm going to choose a location that I know. I'm going to call this example normal map and overwrite one I've done already. There we go. Now I know where my file is saved, and if there's something happens, I'm okay. Now the good news is if nDo or 3Do crash, the plugin will close, but normally Photoshop will remain open. And the good thing about that is when you you can leave Photoshop open with this document, and when you restart nDo, you can pick up right where you left off. Okay. So now we have this radial design here. If I want to add something else in the middle there to complement it, I can choose the ellipse tool, and using the center point, this intersection of these guides, I can hold the Alt and Shift and drag a circle out. Okay, so that looks pretty interesting, right? Cool mechanical design. It's got some style to it. Now, again, how do I make another pattern building off the current pixel information that I've created here, right? So say I wanted to create something that fit within these borders on each one. How would I do that without, I guess I could also create in shape an object like I did here and then slightly rotate it. I'm not sure it would fit exactly, and I don't really want to go through all that effort. So what I can do is use the Magic Wand tool. Again, with contiguous selected and sample all layers on, with a tolerance of 1, I will select only this color. Right? See? Within here. But I've selected too much, right? I don't want to create any information up here. I just want to create something that borders this right here. See? So again, I can contract my selection, and I'll just use my hotkey. But if you don't want to do that, you can go up to Select, Modify, and Contract. It'll bring up the same option. Let's try 3 pixels, see what that gives us. Okay, so there we go. We've got something here that fits within our borders. I don't know if we have to clean up this selection here a little bit, and the easy way to do that is to open your marquee selection and change that to ellipse. So right now it's set to square. If you hold Shift and then click M, that'll change it to an ellipse. And if you hold Alt when you begin the selection, if you currently have a selection open, if you hold Alt and then you begin to drag out, anything that you select within your marquee now will be subtracted from your current selection. So you see here, if you do it properly, there we go. You can see that disappeared. And I think what I also may want to do, I might want to cut off those sharp edges there because I don't really love them very much. Holding Alt again, dragging out, releasing Alt, selecting it one more time to constrain from the center, Shift to make it a nice clean circle. I'm going to cut off those sharp corners of that selection. Just like that. That's probably fine. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new layer because what I'm currently working on is a smart layer, and I can't fill a smart layer with a paint bucket tool. If I try, you get this, and then you get an error. And asks you if you want to rasterize a shape. I say no because I want to keep that layer information. Then Photoshop says fine, I won't let you do what you want to do. So I'm going to create a new layer in Photoshop quickly by hitting Shift, Control N, call it whatever I want. In this case, it doesn't matter so much to me. Now, it's a new blank layer. With the paint bucket tool, I can fill the layer here, hit refresh, see what this looks like in the viewer. Okay? that's pretty cool. But say I want to take this information and I want to make it downward facing. If I change that option over here right now in nDo, everything on this layer will start facing down. I'll show you what I mean. Everything switched, and I'm not particularly interested in doing that. Right? 3Do hasn't updated yet. Give it a moment. There we go. Although that does look kind of cool. Maybe we'll leave it. But for it does actually look kind of cool. Happy accidents. What I'll do is I'll change this back to up, and I can take this selection or this layer and move it into another one altogether. Okay, so I can create a new layer here, a new multi-normal layer with nDo. It'll kick off its creation process here. There we go. I'm going to call this down. Down 2, because it's the second down layer that I have. Okay, now with my up layer selected here, it automatically collapsed it for me. I want to take this layer that we're working with, and I want to move it up into my other layer stack. Okay, and so you're going to notice that it looks funny at first because it's used the default normal format for me. I want to reduce the bevel size here to 3. I think I had it at 3 before, so that'll change that, but it's still facing up. Okay, so I want to change the slant to down, and there we have it. Let's see how this looks in the viewport. Okay, so we'll keep that. That looks fine. It looks a little bit like the helm of a ship, but it's mostly for teaching purposes. Okay, and in the next lesson we'll talk about how to make repeatable patterns in one other way, in a way that requires a little bit less work when it comes to copying and pasting and using guides. You can use the pattern fill option in the layer stack, but currently nDo does not support pattern fill out of the box, so you have to do a little bit of tweaking, and I'll show you how to do that. It's not too big of a pain, but it does take some thought. Okay, see you then.